Okay, so let's try this one. This is sine of 1/3 x. And this 1/3 is not in front of the sine, it's in front of the x. And we learned again from earlier working with functions that when it does that, it does a horizontal. It does a horizontal shrink really, because it shrinks it by a factor of that. But if I'm shrinking by a factor of 1/3, then I'm actually stretching it. So when it's in between 0 and 1, it stretches, but because it's doing a horizontal shrink by a factor of 1/3. But shrinking something by 1/3 really kind of stretches it, whereas shrinking something by 3 definitely shrinks it. So let's kind of see what that means though. So sine graph, we said 0 starts at 0, pi goes to 0, and 2 pi goes to 0. Well, if I sub 2 pi into here, 1/3 times 2 pi would be 2 pi over 3. Sine of 2 pi over 3 is not 0. So this can't be 2 pi where it goes to 0. What could I sub into the x to get it back to 2 pi? I'd have to sub 6 pi in. So this thing actually goes all the way over to 6 pi. So one of these, one period, goes all the way over to 6 pi because it's going to take to 6 pi to get it back to 0. So when I have a horizontal shrink or horizontal stretch, it affects my period in a trig function. So my period is the same thing as 2 pi over whatever you have in front of your x. So if you just have a sine of ax, it would be 2 pi over a. So in this case, be 2 pi over 1/3. Dividing by a fraction is the same thing as multiplying by it. So 2 pi times, multiplying by the reciprocal, 2 pi times 3. So 6 pi, which is what we got. So what this means is I can multiply every point that we know with the sine by 3 to find out where they're going to equal in this new elongated, horizontally stretched graph. So instead of pi, it's going to cross at 3 pi, so we'll call that 3 pi, just halfway in between my 0 and my 6 pi. Instead of heading the highest at pi over 2, we're going to say it hits the highest at 3 pi over 2. Just multiply it by 3. That's where it hits the 1. I'm getting my dots off. And instead of hitting the lowest at 3 pi over 2, it would hit the lowest at 9 pi over 2. You can also do it just by averaging. So 0 plus 3 pi is 3 pi divided by 2 would be halfway in between. 3 pi plus 6 pi is 9 pi divided by 2 would be halfway in between. But that's where it's going to hit the lowest. So my elongated graph, my horizontally stretched graph, looks like that. Notice that my amplitude didn't change. My amplitude is still 1 because there is nothing in front of the sine graph.